Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is our Ventura River Watershed Council meeting, and it's our April agenda. And I want to thank everyone for showing up. We have a nice room in person as well. I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Lauren, and I'm one of the co-coordinators for these meetings. And yeah, I'm new to the RCD, and I'm very excited to be helping Heidi out. And I would also love if everyone could go around and introduce themselves. So we'll do in person first, and then hopefully over Zoom, if you wouldn't mind unmuting and maybe even showing your video to introduce yourself quickly for me. Thank you. First.
Hi, I'm Heidi Ortloff. I am the co-coordinator with Lauren for the Ventura River Watershed Council. And as we go around the room, this is the mic we'll be speaking to. So if you could, it is a conference mic, but if you could just project your voice a little bit.
You can go.
Sure. Morning, Josh Noble, stakeholder.
Great.
Larry Rose, Ojai Conservancy.
Great.
Rose Kubler, Ventura River Water District. Bird Handing, local conservancy.
Catherine DePon Lawson, City of Ventura. Elena Walker, State Ventura Parks and Recreation.
Kieran Patel, Rincon Consultants.
Brian Bondi, Upper Ventura River Groundwater Agency.
Great. And maybe in the back, if you guys want to come forward and introduce yourself. No problem.
Alan O'Connor, Ojai Valley Fire Safe Council.
There's Dan, Ojai Valley Fire Chief.
Great, thank you. Just so everyone in the Zoom kind of knows who's here. I would love to go over the Zoom members if that's possible. Maybe Peter can go first.
Yeah, hey, Peter Schellenbarger, City of Ventura Public Works Department, Stormwater and Water Quality.
Thank you. Melissa Baffa.
Hi, Melissa Baffa, Ventura Land Trust.
People can pop in if they want. I don't have to call them out.
Okay, I'll jump in. Brian Brennan, Casitas Water District Director.
Elizabeth Burns, coordinator of the Southern Steelhead Coalition.
Lynn Rodriguez.
I'm also on the Casitas Water Board.
Hi, everyone. Lynn Rodriguez from the Watersheds Coalition of Ventura County.
Morning, everyone. I'm Evan Lashley, an environmental scientist at United Water Conservation District, but also an Ojai resident.
Hi, this is Vicki Peters, and I'm working with the Ojai Museum on an upcoming exhibit about ag in the Ojai Valley. Also with the Ojai Valley Green Coalition.
I could say hi. My name is Jill Santos. I work for the UC Environmental Stewards Program as well as the UC Cooperative Extension. I'm a community climate educator. Nice to see you all.
Nice to see you too. Anybody else like to introduce themselves? Okay. If anyone has any quick updates, I also encourage you to speak them, but if not, we can go into our first presenter.
Does anyone in the room want to give any general update?
Okay, anyone over Zoom? Okay, so our first presenter is from NOAA. Their name is Kristen Lund, and we are excited to host them if they're ready. Okay, come on up. Oh, I don't have your presentation. Oh, that's okay. It's okay. I'll go grab it.
Yeah, it's been chaotic.
No problem. Let me just mute myself really fast.
You can claim those if you want.
Okay, we have the presentation. Kristen, here you go.
Hi, my name is Kristen Lund. I'm a meteorologist with the National Weather Service. Wow, already starting off, forgetting.
No problem.
Yeah, so if you could go to the next slide, please.
Sure.
I'm just gonna give a brief outlook of who we are, what we do for those who don't know, a post-season review, and then a seasonal outlook. And plus a little extra, for the season, past the season. Yeah, so please. Also, I tend to talk really fast. I'm trying to slow down, so if I'm ever too fast, please let me know and I'm happy to at least attempt to slow down. So first off, we are one office from 122 WFOs or weather forecast offices across the nation, as well as some of our like territories. If you look to the right, it's a little cut off, but we typically serve San Luis Obispo County, Ventura, Santa Barbara, and LA counties, as well as the waters offshore. But you can see like we're right here, and then there's a lot of different other offices that we work together with. And then next slide, please. So we are actually located in Oxnard. A lot of people think we're in Los Angeles, but we started there and then moved in the 90s to Oxnard. So we're not too far away. If you can see from the top picture, that's kind of our operations area. The bottom right is actually our office. And then we also have a lot of retired weather stations and buoys and all of that we kind of collected through donations, and that's called our weather garden. If you're ever interested, you can contact an email I have later on and ask for a tour and kind of see a little bit more of what we do. Next slide, please. So this is our office. You can see there's a lot of us, and we're pretty widespread from where we're originally from. But somehow all of us came here and love what we do. There's 13 forecasters. Right now we have 2 managers. Typically we have 3. We're waiting for our current warning coordination meteorologist. That's someone who you might have known, Eric Bolt, maybe. He retired last year, so we're waiting to fill that position. And then we've got various electronic technicians, someone who does observations and works with like people who volunteer and do what we call co-op sites to provide weather observations for us, which are very useful. And then we have an IT officer and a few other positions that I can't see at the bottom of the slide. It's okay. And then next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about where we came, like where we started and where we're heading to. Where we started was really more sitting behind a computer, you know, looking at models and talking about like, okay, here's what we're expecting. We're putting out watches, warnings, advisories, and that's pretty much it. Maybe you could get us by phone back in the day, but we're really heading towards providing the best guidance we can for those who make decisions based on weather. So that includes building relationships. So for example, any of you could be a partner. And then supporting decision makers. So this would be as simple as someone needing a jacket, like wondering if they need a jacket, to, you know, fire agencies trying to figure out if they need extra staffing during red flag days, or dry, hot, windy, fire days. Or for example, beaches being like, do we need to close the beaches, or we're worried about thunderstorms, we're worried about maybe coastal flooding, as well as, well, I don't know what the other one says, so maybe I'll move it. Oh, will it snow on the freeway? So like helping Department of Transportation be like, okay, do we need extra staffing? Do we need to have like snow plows or something up near like the Grapevine to Hone Pass or something? So yeah, and next slide, please. Maybe.
Yeah, April. There you go.
So we do this a lot of different ways to message and get our information out. We have our website, we have alerts that you've probably seen a lot of this year and last year. We have our weather radio towers that like go out to people who have weather radios, social media, direct phone calls, which will have a phone number that you'll see later. Virtual presentations with meetings or in-person meetings. Email, webinar, press briefings, and deploying out to like emergency centers when they need it. Next slide, please. Yeah, so if you haven't been to our website, it's gonna get a remodel. It's a little confusing, unfortunately, but it's gonna get a remodel. It should be easier to use in the next year or so. At least that's what we're hoping for. But
Can I ask, like, what's the remodel supposed to change or? If you don't
over
know,
the
that's
years,
okay, I guess.
I don't know personally, it's just supposed to make it a lot easier for users to find what they want, because we get a lot of calls being like, hey, do you know where I can find this? Or like we try to direct people and they get lost if it's on the phone. And we have trouble finding stuff sometimes. So it needs a little bit more massaging to make it more friendly and like people can find things. But we do our best. We do have icons at the bottom that separate out. Can't really read them, but it's like by like hazards, observations, marine weather, fire weather, different little icons you can click on to find what you're looking for, hopefully. If not, you can call us. But there is in tiny corners that nobody ever sees. There's a place you can look up like a location and come to like a point forecast or click on this map, but it doesn't do a good job of knowing where you're clicking because it's tiny. And that will give you the 7-day outlook. And then we have this hazard map. Right now you can see there's like small, well, not right now, but when this picture was taken, there were small cracks and like gale warnings, some wind advisories in the Ventura Mountains. So that will show like the hazards we have, and you can click on the hazards on the side if you see it over your area and be like, okay, I'm expecting a wind advisory. This could cause these issues. But then we have a drop-down menu that I want to highlight. That's like our most recent products that we put out. So like if it's 2:30, you'll have seen the area forecast discussion, maybe the zone forecast zone forecasts. Those are like specific areas. But if you go to the area forecast discussion, that will bring you to something that looks like that. That's what we spend a lot of our time writing. We do 2 updates around 9 a.m. and 2, well, I guess we do 2 full forecast packages. One around 2:30 p.m. is when that comes out, and then the other around 3:30 a.m. And then we have 2 like tonight, tomorrow, or today, tonight period updates. Really only a 2-period update is what we call. But those come out 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. So what we spend our time on is writing the forecast. I mean, obviously forecasting, but writing the forecast discussion, explaining what you might not see in the the 7-day outlook, being like, okay, here's why you might see precipitation, but it's only a 20% chance. Here's why it might be colder, or here's how much colder it is below normal, which we've seen a lot with these storms. And this storm coming up right now. So that's a really good way to see like what might happen that's not in the official forecast. As well as like, if you're a weather nerd like me, I mean, I write these too, but if you're a weather nerd like me, you can read a little bit of the meteorological background. Some people get more into it. Some people are more like, average person friendly, and then some people are like using all these technical terms that sometimes I don't even know. So just check for the next forecast if it doesn't make sense. So next one. Yeah, I'll be going over a season overview. One thing I didn't include, I don't know how many of you are aware of like Enzo, La Nina, El Nino things. But El Nino typically means we have above normal precipitation for the year, and we're kind of heading out of that phase. We're still into it, but we're kind of heading out of that, and we're leaning towards the more likely probability of having a La Nina by June, July, August, and this would mean below normal precipitation, drier conditions. So next slide, please. Oh, it's cut off. It's okay. So this is the precipitation, the total precipitation we've had, based on our water year, which starts in October 3rd, until 2 days ago. So as you can see, the total precipitation, I mean, even across the state is really above normal. So you can see our area is probably around like, what was it, 10? I think that's, thank you, 10 to 30, above normal. I think that's inches, yeah, 10 to, I guess we're not up to 30 yet. Sorry, about 10 to 20 inches above normal. Over here, you can see the percent of normal, which we kind of put Ojai on here, just because we're close by to Ojai. But for precipitation, we're about 27.72 inches right now for the water year, which is 8.79 inches above normal. So that's about 146% of normal compared to, you know, an average year in the last 20, 30 years. Next slide, please. As for temperatures, we're also above normal since the water year, which is a little strange because our systems have been so cold. But we're about, our max average temperature is about 71, and that's about 1.1 degrees above normal. And then our minimums have been about 39 for Ojai. That's about 1.7 degrees above normal for low temperatures overnight. And you can see it's kind of across the board, above normal. So next slide, please. As for the drought, I mean, looking at last year around this time and then this year, you can see like, you know, we weren't really in a drought. Like LA had a little bit of abnormally dry. And then this year, like most of the state is pretty much no drought, just a little bit of abnormally dry up in the eastern ends, maybe the northern end, which is good news. And I don't know if you saw our post, but it's been like, we're coming up on, for downtown LA at least, we're coming up on like the second wettest back-to-back like years. We're coming up to like, I think the record is 54 inches of rain in the 2 years, and we're at like 52 or 51 right now. So we've had a lot of rain, which is good considering the last several years that we've seen. Next slide, please. And then the seasonal outlook. I didn't include any photos, I apologize, but I think we've all witnessed enough over the last couple of years of like what the winters have looked like. But the seasonal outlook, yeah, so this is the 8 to 14 day. I want to quickly briefly touch on the storm we're about to see in case anybody's like worried. We're only going to see about maybe under 0.5 inches, so half an inch for the area. It's going to be really scattered showers, isolated showers, maybe some light rain ahead of it. Some of the areas that might see more towards the 0.5 inches would be like the mountains, foothills, or where any heavier shower goes through, which leads to, we have a 15 to 30% chance of thunderstorms over like the next 2 days, so through Friday. This would lead to the potential of locally gusty winds, small hail, brief heavy downpours. Nothing like Montecito saw the last couple days. I don't know if you, or last week, I don't know if you heard about that, but not expecting that. Yeah. And then, yeah, that's just a quick look at the storm going up. But the 8 to 14 day outlook, we're looking at likely leaning to likely above normal temperatures. Now, normal for this time is around 70 degrees for highs and around 49 for lows. For precipitation, and you'll find this unfortunately common, we're looking at like near normal precipitation, which that's about, you know, it's April right now, so we're looking at like maybe 0.75 inches for all of April. And then next slide, please. This is like the 3 to 4, so we're still in April, 3 to 4. And this is from our partner agency. Sorry for not mentioning that. It's from the Climate Prediction Center. We work closely with them. We use their products and try to give a seasonal outlook for this kind of thing. And so for temperatures, equal chances, doesn't really tell us a lot, unfortunately. It's like equal chances of above, below, or near normal. So you can see that on both the precipitation and the temperature outlook. So we really can't say if it's gonna be near or above or below, unfortunately. Which makes it really tough to do presentations like this if you can't tell. But yeah, that's for April. If you go to the next slide, please. And then this would be May, June, July. So I did say like I'm gonna go a little bit past spring because as you can see, like the beginning of spring isn't too exciting, but we're leaning above normal for temperatures. Normal during this time period. So May is typically around the low 70s for highs. And then as we get to July, we lean towards the high 70s. For precipitation, now we are heading towards our dry season, marine layer season. Really nothing concerning in terms of like big storms. So May we'll see maybe around 1/2 inch, 1/3 of an inch for the whole month of May. And then for June, July, it's like under 1/10 of an inch for normals for this time of year, or for June, July time of year. So next slide, please. And then August, September, October. We are leaning slightly above normal temperatures, which normal is sitting around that high 70s, not 90s, high 70s. And then tapering down to like mid 70s as we get through to October. And then for precipitation, again, equal chances of above, below, or equal or near normal chances for above, below, or near normal precipitation, which again, August, September is rather dry, like under 1/10 of an inch, and then October it starts to pick up again. One thing to mention is, you know, with the La Nina coming in, we saw Hurricane Hillary last year give us some flooding, or like nearby more southern areas got more flooding. With the La Nina and the precipitation outlook being like this, it's more likely that we'll just have high pressure build over the 4 corners. So this area of the states. And that tends to make it really dry for us. It tends to, you know, La Nina would be not really monsoony. So the mountains might not see as much rain. I mean, we really haven't seen a monsoon season too much the last 2 years either. And then the La Nina might lead to, you know, a lesser chance of seeing a Hurricane Hillary, which already is very rare. Next slide, please. Yeah, one thing to mention, I mean, it's quiet season. So while that might not mean storms for us, the southern hemisphere, it's their winter, so they're gonna be seeing storms. And this will lead to like increased surf, increased coastal flooding during this season, and as well as like more hazardous marine conditions. I don't know if any of you are sailors or love the like ocean, but that tends to lead to more big surfs, big swells. So while we have like a quiet storm period, the marine won't be necessarily quiet. Yeah, so next slide, please. So key points again, winter had above normal precipitation and fairly above normal temperatures, and we're not currently in a drought. For the outlooks, we are heading towards our dry, quiet marine layer season. And I kind of assumed you all knew what marine layer season was, but that means like low clouds, fog, like, you know, all the time. May gray, June gloom, keeps going with all those names. And then we're mostly leaning above normal temperatures, just slightly. And then mainly equal chances for above, below, near normal precipitation. Are there any questions? Oh, well, I guess you can go to the next slide. I'll wrap it up.
Cute.
So if you have any questions, this is the majority of the office minus I think a few of us, including me. But if you have any questions, you can call us. If you can't read that, I can give you the number. And the email, I can also give you the email if you can't read that. Or you can interact with us on social media if you happen to have a Twitter/X account, Facebook, Instagram. We're a little less interactive on Instagram. It's a little harder for us, just because of technology. But you know, yeah. And then that's our handle down below. Are there any questions from the tele world or in person?
I have comments over Zoom of saying that they like when it's June bloom season.
It's a lot quieter.
So for the rest of April and into May, what's it look like for any continued bigger storms, like 2, 3, 4 inches of precipitation?
Yeah, right now we're not really seeing that. However, it is a little difficult. I mean, our most confident period, unfortunately, is that 1 to 3 days. And then kind of 6 to 7, we have a little bit more issues. We were able to, with this last storm, a lot of the models and the data we were looking at were starting to like converge on like hey, this is going to be a significant storm. But this far out, it's a little harder to say that it's going to be really significant storms like that. But right now it is looking very quiet. There might be, I think we were looking at potential rain on Monday, but that would have been really light. And I think that's getting wiped out from some offshore flow in Santa Ana's. So, but again, that could change because models are.
We're just trying to help the presentations.
No worries. Yeah. Yes.
So what are the early indications on the depth of the last year?
In terms of.
The intensity.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're looking at, so we're heading towards end zone neutral and it's really only like a 62-63% chance of a La Nina. So I think it's looking pretty weak, but chances are increasing for it. But they come out with outlooks pretty often, if I'm correct. And so that might change in the next couple months, but right now I believe it's looking pretty weak because the chances are so low.
And is there any look back at sort of the anomalous wet year? Because last year was La Nina, but we still had, 50 inches of rain.
Yeah. So I personally don't know too much about that. I can find out for you if you'd like to share, share contact information. However, I do know there are, we call them teleconnections, but there are a lot of different things that go into our season. So this year we had the jet stream, which drives a lot of our weather systems. That kept dropping really low and bringing a lot of cold storms with a lot of like instability, bringing all these thunderstorms consistently. I swear it was like every weekend. But last year, yeah, I'm not too sure, but I can get back to you on that.
Elizabeth, do you have a question? You can feel free to unmute yourself.
Hello, thank you for this cool presentation. I wanted to ask you about the Pacific Decadal Oscillation PDO. Are you seeing this being more like a traditional PDO? Because it seems like we were changing La Nina and El Nino pretty frequently nowadays, and that goes against everything I was taught. But like, I'm not a weather, I'm not from NOAA. I don't know that. I just know about marine stuff. So, yeah. It's been confusing the heck out of me, actually. It's been like really confusing because like they talk about all these patterns and I'm like, I don't see it happening right now.
Yeah. Again, I'm so sorry. I do not know that off the top of my head. I can look into that. I can ask my coworkers, see what answers they may have. If you want to email us, we can get
Yeah.
back to you on that. I'm so sorry, but yeah. Any other questions?
One more question I had was, so because like we're getting so much storms. So
Mhm.
you said that was from the jet stream, right?
Yeah, that's one of the that's like one of the reasons. There might be a few others in there, but right now it's just from what I've seen and what my coworkers have seen, it's just the jet stream has been constantly dropping lower, which tends to happen with El Niños, but this has been typically like the El Niños Enzo doesn't really affect us too much. So this has been more just jet streams dropping. Yeah, so did that answer your question?
Yes, kind of. Just more that weather patterns aren't weather patterning.
Yeah, and there could be a lot going into that right now, that we're still looking into as, not just the National Weather Service, but NOAA as a whole. They're kind of our parent agency, that we sit under, and so as far as we know right now, it's just jet streams, but there's other factors that go into that. I mean, I believe one year we had one year for the Enzo pattern, we had sea surface temperatures a little more east than they normally set up, and that had affected us. So while we're still in the season, it's hard, or like the year it's happening, it's hard to say exactly what's causing something. I mean, I could get into the climate change talk, but
Yeah.
if you want to do that. But
So my final question is, what's the likelihood of getting another atmospheric river next year? Because I feel like that term or jet stream actually has just been rearing its ugly head over and over again. Not that I don't like the rain, but like it seems like it's just popping up all of a sudden.
Yeah, so atmospheric rivers, I mean, that has always been a concern that we've seen over years and years and years. In the past, I believe it was called, the Pineapple Express, I think. And atmospheric rivers is more like an internal thing, but as social media came about and more people getting more interest, like more of the average person getting more interested in like weather or different topics in general, it's really picked up with the media. So atmospheric rivers are pretty common for us. I mean, not every storm has the atmospheric river cap, but that's just whenever we have moisture coming from the tropics getting funneled into our storms. I mean, I think you might know this, but the jet stream has always been like our driver for storms, but it hasn't necessarily dropped as low as it has been every single year. So it's a little bit of different. It depends on the situation of the storm and if it can pull enough moisture from the south and direct it straight at us. I mean, a lot of the times that we can get the atmospheric rivers straight up to Washington and we get no rain, or like it will set up to our south and San Diego will get everything. So they're always there, not necessarily the atmospheric river, but like it's always there driving our weather for the jet stream. It's just a matter of if it's over us.
I assume that the Sierra Nevadas are what really stops the jet stream from moving or kind of moves around it.
Oh, I don't know that off the top of my head. I want to say no, because the jet stream is so high up in the atmosphere that it's way higher than the Sierra Nevadas. There's a lot of things that go into where the jet stream sets up, and we can also get into like, sometimes storms are cut off lows away from the jet stream. Like we had one where we had thunderstorms over LA, I swear, every day.
Yeah, that was so weird. Yeah, because I live down there. Yeah, I live down there.
But yeah.
I'm gonna hop in if I can. Just to get to a few of these questions really
Yeah,
fast.
sorry.
No, that was great. I love the enthusiasm, Elizabeth. We want to know if you're familiar with the acronym AMOC, AMOC. AMOC, someone?
It sounds familiar.
Okay, no problem. And maybe if Peter, you had your hand up, we can ask a quick question, and then Danny, if you put your question in the chat, maybe we can get to it later. Go ahead, Peter.
Is you mentioned that La Nina may be coming back. Does that mean the ridiculously resilient ridge may present itself next fall, winter, and we could have conditions similar to what we've seen the last few years with low rain, dry? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, so not necessarily for multiple years in a row, because that is a little far out to forecast for. There is models like, you know, try to do that, but it's, I believe it's like not currently messaged very easily. At least for this next year, as long as the probability and the likelihood of the La Nina coming about continues to increase, that could mean a lot drier conditions with that ridge just sitting up, like you mentioned, over, and I mentioned over the Four Corners, and just, I mean, that could cause more elevated fire season, unfortunately, especially with how much rain we had and as these soil moistures dry out. But yeah, so we could just have dry weather and lack of precipitation, but it depends on how long the La Nina lasts, which I haven't seen any messaging about that from the people that do the Enzo and La Nina kind of outlooks. So did that answer your question?
No, that's helpful. So drier,
Yeah.
drier seasons, maybe even, yeah, that's
And
fine. Thank you.
Maybe Danny, you can unmute yourself and ask your question, and then we'll have to move on to our next presentation. But thank you. Yeah,
sorry
so
for taking
no,
so long.
it's totally fine. Danny, go ahead. Okay, maybe we'll just go to the next presentation. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much.
And I'm sure we'll have more questions. And I know we kind of want to take our group to the NOAA facility.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that
definitely
plays out.
the email.
And
Thank you so much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Our next presentation is from the Ojai Valley Land Conservancy about the Seek the Creek program.
Just feel like there should be a microphone.
Oops, sorry.
Hi, I'm Tom Maloney. I'm the Executive Director of the Ojai Valley Land Conservancy. With us today is Larry Rose, Board Member of Ojai Valley Land Conservancy, and Vivon Proper, our Director of Restoration. I want to talk about Seek the Creek, which we did last year, tell you what was found in that, and then talk about a project we have upcoming this year, because, you know, we should be looking forward, not back. So Seek the Creek started when I got to OVLC, and I said to my colleague, I'm really excited to work on the dam removal, and she laughed. She said, you mean the thing that they've been planning as long as I've been alive? And so it became clear we needed to sort of think about the community vision for what was going to be created, not the tired piece of infrastructure that was going to be removed. So what's the affirmative vision of what we're going to try to do? So we did a ton of public outreach. We had expert stakeholder tours up to the dam. We had individual meetings with, you know, key people at Watershed Protection, others. We did some Chumash tours up to the dam to really think about that. I'll come back to that in a minute. And really, we had two big, well-attended public meetings. And really everybody said they want nature-based recreation that's well-managed. People were really clear that they didn't just think you should just pull the gate out and just let people go hog wild up there. We did it in the context, which is very germane to the Watershed Council, of the entire river from Surfers Point all the way up, you know, into the National Forest, because everything sits in that, you know, recreational access to water and to the river, you know, sits in that matrix. And our consultants, SALT landscape architects out of LA, really immediately identified the fact that we still have time. You know, in the wildest, best imaginings, the dam will come out in 2030. But that was before the big deficits at state funding. And so a lot of what was, you know, a year ago, we're saying we have the will and the money now. And the money part is starting to go back into the governor's budget right now because of these huge deficits that are happening. But there's a lot already that's been allocated. A lot of the associated infrastructure with dam removal are being, you know, sort of tackled right now, especially roadless, which is the big one. But what the consultant said was, continue to do programming as you go. And that's particularly true for the Chumash, because the local band was very clear in saying, it's not a really fair question to say, what do you want to see here when it's been just, they're coming at it from a point of scarcity. So we've been encouraging Coastal Conservancy and others to have consistent tours. The crew now with Once Upon a Watershed has access. We should do a watershed council meeting up at the dam site and get updates. But they have access to get up there, and they're leading monthly school trips and other trips up there as a partner to watershed protection. That type of programming and continued enthusiasm is a big part of what came out of the Seek the Creek process. The other part is if we're wildly successful and some entity, OVLC or somebody else, becomes the holder of those 400 acres at the dam and the old hot spring site and other parcels. We're currently buying about 234 acres of land right along the river. We're in the campaign mode, so if you brought your checkbooks, it's fantastic. If we're wildly successful, how do you fund ongoing stewardship there? I mean, you talk to Santa Ana River Conservancy and these other conservancies throughout the Southland of California. They did great in getting all the land, but now they have this very persistent, year in, year out headache of stewardship, which is really challenging in Southern California for anything that's got water. So there's a lot of contemplation of special districts or other things that we should be thinking about as we move ahead, but that's down the road if we're wildly successful. The other thing we focused on, because we should and the agencies want to see it, is how do we reach into populations that we don't typically reach into. So the next project is really focused, the next slide, is really focused on that, because with the Trust for Public Land, OVLC acquired the 28-acre, we call it the RDK, it's now called the Parkway Preserve, the big blank field next to the Brooks campus, we're the proud owners of, and the 60,000 yards of asphalt shavings there. And so TPL said, we recognize this is a problematic site, we'll stay with the land, we'll help you raise money to do the restoration. And so we got just about November, we got awarded a $315,000 grant from the National Coastal Resilience Fund to do the restoration planning there. Next slide. So this piece here is what we own. Brooks is here, that's the big film studio, and then Cañada Larga Creek comes out here. Cañada Larga, oddly, it used to do this sort of left-hand turn and then hard right turn to discharge to the Ventura River down here through what's now Petrochem. I'd always assumed that it just got rerouted when we put the highway in, but I guess if you go back and you look at the hydrography from before the highway, it used to make these two odd turns. Larry will tell me if I'm right, but in 2005, there was a huge thunderstorm cell over Cañada Larga that dumped 11 inches of rain. That just completely blew out and caused over $1 million of damage at Brooks. The culverts are undersized. The prior owner had been trying to fill their way out of the floodplain. And so they had a whole design of a bioswale to keep the site dry so they could have industrial uses. So the grant is to think about what are we going to do about the flooding issues here, as well as what are we going to do about public access. There's a bus stop on the avenue. So if you're going to reach into the north end of Ventura and provide river access, this is a fantastic spot to do it. Next slide. This is the flood map. It's all obviously 100-year flood. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. And so, as I said before, RDK, we are the owners of that storage yard as well, because when TPL was doing the deal, they did a 20-year lease back to lower the price by $3 million because they couldn't raise all the money to buy the whole site. So we're the proud owners of a commercial storage yard, and those guys are great, really easy to deal with. But as I said, they were trying to design a bioswale to convey flood water through the site as quickly as possible so they could have more industrial development there. We're not gonna do that. We don't need to think about conveying the water through. So we've hired Jensen to work with us to really think about how do we get, maybe flood attenuation, flood storage here, sort of constructed wetland systems so that it doesn't, it could be kind of a receiving zone for any overage, any overcapacity floodwaters that are too big for the culverts. Next slide. This is what the grant provides for. It provides for preliminary design to the 30-60% design solution. We're not required to get the permits, but we gotta, touch all the bases and talk to everybody to say, is this reasonable? We got to get support from neighboring landowners and community members. And then the word is from the experts at Terrestrial Public Land, he actually is in Vermont, who know the NIFWIF process, say, of National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. Sorry, they funded my first job at a grad school, so NIFWIF just rolls off my tongue. They will fund the subsequent phases once you're in the pipeline. And it's good because I think, there's NIFWIF's getting good funding through federal sources right now. So where the state is really feeling the pinch, the federal funding might be a bit more reliable. Next slide. We got to go through general plan and zoning. It's all zone industrial. We got to think about that. I'm always pointing out that industrial is like the limitation, it's sort of, if you do something lesser under zoning, it shouldn't be a problem, but we may want to do a zone change just to have it aligned with county zoning. Next slide. The Ventura River Trail goes right through the site. This was one of the problems when RDK was working on the flood conveyance because, in a storm event, if you were really taking all that water and you rerouted the whole creek, the trail you'd have to build a bridge. In thinking about the potential for flooding that might flood the trail, that's such a remote, recurrence interval being, 20 to 50 year probably storm event. I don't know that we're gonna have to work with the city on that because the city owns the trail, even though we're in county here, the city owns the trail. But it's an awesome opportunity to really think about. I'm always so impressed how many people use the bike trail. I mean, it's just every weekend, it's just loaded with folks. And it's a really great opportunity to, talk about conservation, that it's not always, the Thoreau ideal wilderness, but you also have to take some of these sites that are a bit blighted and fix them up. Next slide. So meaningful community engagement, we've hired the Morito Foundation to lead field trips to the site and really reach into North Ventura communities along the avenue and really try and get community buy-in to see what they want to see there. There's a huge Arundo stand there, so we're gonna have to deal with that in terms of restoration. As I said, there's all this shaped asphalt, there's soil that was dumped there. We're gonna have to think about pushing that stuff around or getting it off. If anybody has some ranch roads they need to renovate, we're open for business. That's the ecological restoration part. So in thinking about like the bike trail, the bus stop on the avenue, folks want to get to the water, whether or not they can, you're below the sewage treatment plant, the treatment plant there, like, what do you, I don't know about water contact recreation there, but just getting to the water. I have in my mind's eye, some ramadas, maybe some picnic tables, a place for people to really hang out. People have already said bathrooms. I can tell you our stewardship staff have no interest in having bathrooms there. Flood management, bike trail. I see the bike trail as an opportunity and a constraint based on what I heard from the prior owner. The stewardship challenges are significant there. There's a very persistent homeless population there, or unhoused, that just the prior owner was having to deal with. There's been a lot of focus on the petrochem site by the city of Ventura. That's kind of like, you ask people to leave there and they end up at RDK, and then we have our people go and then they end up closer to Steelhead, and they it's nail and jello to a tree, really. And then the contractor yard, as I said, we're in year, look at Larry and Bavon. We're in year 3 of the 20-year lease. Those guys are great. I don't see a reason to do anything with the contractor yard until that lease runs out. It gets cheaper every year because you get closer and closer to the terminus of the lease back, but there's no real reason. Okay, next slide. Again, but, you know, we've got all it's critical habitat for southern steelhead. There's opportunities. I know that the Trust for Public Land has the riverward 53 acres of petrochem under option. And they've been working with them to make sure the site's clean enough for conservation. So between the two sites and a sympathetic owner at Brooks, you know, there's probably some real opportunities there to do something really integrated and get a lot more use there. Because if you think about from there down, the river's pretty cut off from the community. You know, you get giant levees there. Okay, next slide. Again, this is from the watershed plan that we really should be thinking about getting more access for underserved communities. And so, you know, we're living up to that as a member of the Watershed Council. Next slide. So on June 7th, I think it is, Marito's going to have a big event out there, and we're going to be serving tacos and just trying to get the community to come out. Don't quote me. I'll have these guys announce it when I'm positive about the date. But that'll be a really good event to get, you know, the community to say, okay, what do you really want to see here? What I've noticed in my portion of my career in California is, you know, Latino populations don't go to nature the way I do, you know. And my story for that is that Armstrong Redwood State Park, some friends and I went and did the 6-mile hike up to the Tan Oaks and back. When we left, nobody was there. When we came back, there were huge multi-generational families all setting up to have picnics all day in the little campground picnic area there. And you know, we went, you know, back to the coast and kept hiking and doing stuff, but they were just there with like little kids all the way up to, you know, grandparents. And that's we need to think about that when we think about diverse access. At OVLC, we don't provide anything that accommodates that use. In fact, during COVID, it was kind of a challenge because everywhere else was closed, and we had people coming just hang out on the river, which is, you know, ends up being a real stewardship headache. So yeah, we'll see what they want though. We're doing it for them. So, and the West Side, we met with this slideshow was easy for me to do because we did it for Supervisor LeVere, and they kept saying that West Side Community Council is just dynamite, and we should just really be relying on them for a lot of outreach. Next slide. More of the same, sorry. Oh, you know, thinking about Cañada Larga and water quality, you know, are there opportunities to maybe think about flood attenuation further upstream and improving siltation and water quality? You know, talking to NOAA about what the steelhead problems are coming out of that. It's the, you know, the cattle in the creek, there's a lot of siltation. You know, could we do stuff further upstream to really help that? And maybe some, you know, flood retention basins to attenuate flood flows during the real peaks, maybe get some infiltration into the groundwater as well. Next slide. That's our presentation. Any questions?
Thank you. I just want to say we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions, and then for the in-person people, we had like a break, so you can chat amongst yourselves. Do you have any chat or questions in the Zoom?
I see no questions in the chat, and I don't see a hand up.
Okay. Any?
We did have a comment, someone happy you were working with the Merido Foundation.
Oh, great.
My understanding is that there's no access for steelhead up into Cañada Larga because of the orientation of the channels and stuff.
Yeah, when you stand at that bridge at Petrochem and look down, there's a big concrete apron there that there's no, you know, I don't even think a king salmon could get over that in high flows because it's probably as tall as I am. It looks like it wouldn't be hard to just blow that thing out and get access right there. Further upstream, I don't know, maybe there's some culvert design questions. I used to do a lot of fish passage back east, so, but that site, there's no access.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I got a real quick one. I might have misheard you too. When you were initially talking about the dam removal thing, did you say something about a Robles dam?
Oh, no, Robles diversion. So obviously if you're the Casitas Water Management District, you're very concerned about the 8 million cubic yards of sediment that's gonna come out and fill the forebay repeatedly. So doing a redesign on the forebay that sort of enables sediment free water to go into the canal is all like, God, I don't know, $750,000 of engineering going on right now.
Got it.
Great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
We look forward to chatting more. And next, so we have the Ventura River Trail Improvement Project from the city of Ventura. Who first would like to come speak? I know you have a handful.
We're gonna have.
Great. You can feel free to introduce yourself at the beginning.
I'm Tori Slininger with Pacific Coast Land Design. We also have Alex Buba with the city of Ventura and Elena Wall, city of Ventura. Just to show of hands, how many people are familiar with this specific improvement project right now? Our noticing was not as good as we thought it was. Okay. I can't say that I would know about
I
it.
found out about it through social media. That was our.
Yeah, yeah, we had some engagement budget, but, so anyway, more people to get the word out. You can go to the next slide. This is a quick agenda. It was actually adapted from can confirm about the West Side Community Council. They're amazing. So this is adapted from the West Side Community Council. Slideshow that we did.
Sorry.
And then, oh yeah, you can go for it. Again, I'm here with Pacific Coast Land Design. We did the design of the trail in conjunction with Kimley Horn, Encompass Consulting and Earth Systems. It is an improvement project, so it's a 1.8 mile stretch from like Rex Stubbers, a very awkward intersection of Ventura all the way up to the city boundary line, which is the huge flood wall if you've ridden the trail at all. So it's a 1.8 mile stretch. It actually works very well into the previous conversation about the Canada Larga area and the larger Ventura River Trail as a whole, which is almost 15 miles from Ventura up to Ojai. And then in addition, we worked with Alex and Derek at the city of Ventura. Great. So this is funded through Clean California, which is the Caltrans grant. The funding became available in 2011. Project was awarded $5 million and it was highly competitive because there was no city match required, 0% match from the city. Importance and precedent for the project was areas that were impacting underserved communities. That is probably a very large reason that we got this grant is because of its proximity to the avenue in the west side of it. So these are eligible activities and expenses funded with the grant. Most of them we were able to cover with the actual improvement projects. So some of the important ones I'll go over are shade trees and drought tolerant plantings, although that's pretty minimal if we didn't have irrigation on the project or access to it. Bioretention, community art, just pavement redo, and the bathrooms are actually already at West Park Skate Park, so we didn't add any more. And then amenities and wayfinding is huge. So the general goals and the goals as they align with the Clean California grant are to reduce waste and debris adjacent to the trail, beautify and improve the trail, enhance the public health, cultural connection and community placemaking of the area, advance equity for Ventura's West Side community, and bring more bike shade and reduce the urban heat damage. Quick history of the trail. It was a railroad constructed in the 1890s originally, and then 1999 it was converted to a trail and open to the public. And pretty much everything you see today is what was constructed in 1999. There's been minimal improvements and minimal renovations since then. So this is much needed. Again, if you bike or especially bike, but also walk the trail, you'll know that it is needed. And then part of the reason also we got the Caltrans grant funding is because it was designated as a national recreation trail in 2014. And that was due in large part to Kathy Bremer and the fence of the Ventura. So this is almost impossible to see. It's kind of like a video. I don't even know it has the capability to scroll through. So this is the Ojai Valley section, which again starts, I believe that's Foster Park,
This is a very small Omer Rain section down here. And then this is, blue section is what's considered the Ventura River, the Ventura portion, and the 1.8 miles, I believe goes up to about there, but yeah, it's overall, it's a small-ish section of the Ventura.
Sorry, that section is from Bonds to the OST yard. Okay, thanks.
The
The
I guess,
1.8.
what's the OST? Did you say OST?
It's
It doesn't
the,
include OSTR does before Stanley. It does, but it goes further than that. To the flood wall.
Yeah, the flood wall is a city limit.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to it when I show.
Right, I'm thinking CD line is the one before that, the OST is the one after.
Oh, yeah, I know, I'm familiar with city
thank you.
okay, so we did have a public meeting on December 6th, 2022. We had, again, the stipulations of the grant were pretty specific, so we had mostly the opportunity to share with the community like I'm doing right now, and in addition, they voted on some elements, including the trail themes, on trail wayfinding and kiosks, interpretive elements, and the amenities. And we did have over 300 responses from the online survey and so the themes that we're the public was able to choose from were modern, colorful, railroad theme, kind of paying homage to the history, and then the natural riparian theme. That one was, as you can see, it was, voted most popular, and most people wanted to stick with natural riparian, which is great, and also a little bit challenging, because contrary to what it says in this section of it, the Ventura River Trail, and this section of it is nowhere near the actual, well, it's near, but it's separated from the river by the 33, which is in that location of 4-lane highway. So good intentions, and hopefully we can draw some of that back into the railway. But again, as you go further up, especially toward Ojai, you get more of that natural element. You're able to interact with it, just not so much in that area. So we have 3 options for clean or for wayfinding, or for strong identity, hanging signage, and clean and simple signage, again, that the public voted on in the person meeting and online. And then pretty substantially the clean and simple signage as well. And then we voted on interpretive elements between sensory activity, ecological signage, a pollinator habitat, or entire interactive element. And then this was a little bit closer, but ecological signage did win out, so that's what we ended up doing. Next, so again, most of these amenities and improvements were stipulated in the grant, and we were able to do a lot of them with the funding that we had and the design that we had, including waste receptacles, solar lighting, fencing, trees, occasional like rest bulb out areas, and public art. So this was a vote just in case we had to do some value engineering and take out certain amenities. But again, all of these made it into the project. So this was more in case we needed to remove something. We had public sentiment behind what it was we needed to remove. Okay, this is a great example of the before, where you have the 33 and then the Ventura River actually is over that hump, and then a fairly like widened section of the trail. And forward, we have a rendering. So I think it's something like 300 to 500 new trees are going to be planted along it, some of which have already been planted through a separate project that PCLD was also involved in through ASIC. So we have lots of new trees, and again, this is not what it'll look like when they go in. This is hopefully like 20 years down the road when they're matured. We have a new path. It's either a slurry seal, a full depth replacement, or a full depth reclamation throughout the entire path. It was originally supposed to be designed to be ADA in 1999, and it was not. And so that was a large challenge with us in Kimley-Horn, was getting it to those ADA, the whole path to those ADA standards, especially when it's open off the side. We also have the solar lighting, and then the waste receptacles back Here's another section. This is West Park Skate Park with West Park and West Park Community Center back here with the existing ball fields and then that restroom. If you go next. This makes the entrance from that restroom area and from West Park Community Center, ADA accessible right now. There's a very incredibly steep, like just ad hoc entryway that is borderline impossible to bike up. So this is a huge improvement. And again, we have lots of trees and a few shrubs here and there to brighten the area. And then here we have the final. So again, if you have written it, this is the flood wall. This is the city line that we're talking, the city boundary line that we're talking about. And here we thought, if you go forward, it was a great opportunity for public art. And that's what Elaine is going to talk a little bit more about. And this was just a concept rendering. Not at all what's actually going to be.
Great, thank you. That was great. Great.
Thank you so much. Could we go back one more?
Yeah, of course. Oh, sorry. I
There
just
we go. Great.
spoiled it.
No, surprise. So for those of you at home, my name is Elena Waller. I'm with the City of Ventura Parks and Recreation. And I am going to be talking to you a little bit about the proposed public art mural that is proposed at this site that you see here on this slide. This is the existing levee flood walls that we have. And again, as Tori was saying, this is kind of at the northern limits of the Ventura City. It's right before you cross into the Ventura County area. And as you can see, it's kind of a natural gateway in itself. So it was no surprise that this was the location that they designated for this public art mural. Right now, this flood wall, we might have like driven or ridden right past it or walked past it because, you know, it doesn't have that beautiful appeal that we're looking for in beautifying this trail. Right now, it's a little bit more like a large canvas for, you know, graffiti and tagging. So there is a proposal, if you can go to the next slide, please, to introduce a public art mural at this site. Now, in the past, we have realized that with the help of our community, introducing public art murals has been a fantastic way of combating tagging, graffiti. And so as you see here, this is a proposed mural. This is not the design. This is just the design that you can see the potential of what might go into this area. And this is where the Parks and Recreation kind of come into play with the public art murals. If you can move on to this one. So the West Side has had a strong connection with public art murals through time. In fact, our oldest existing art mural right now is on the West Park Community Center. It was introduced in 1987, so over 45 years ago, well over 45 years ago. And then you can see some examples here that we have of some of the public art murals on the west side. The one at the very bottom here, Pura Avenida, or also known as Wall Street mural. This is 600 feet long, and it was a group community public art mural endeavor with over 57 artists, local artists. So they were working with the community to kind of encapsulate what traditions and culture we have in the area. So it's actually a very nice jump into the flood walls to also be able to capture that the history of what was happening at the Ventura River Trail. You can go on to the next one. So right here, as Tori was saying, we had several community gatherings. It was an overwhelming response for a riparian, natural riparian characteristics and ecology as a concept for the Ventura River Trail. When they were discussing the public art mural, that also came up. That was the #1 concept that they wanted to incorporate in the design. But they also had a couple of extra ones, extra concepts that they wanted to introduce as well. As an entry point to the city of Ventura, we already talked about it, it's kind of a gateway, so that was a very natural jump there. And then the cultural significance of Ventura's west side and the city as a whole. Now, this is kind of a tall order for an artist, you know, trying to get all of these concepts into one design. But thankfully, we're in Ventura County and we have some very talented and creative artists. So when we opened the request for proposals on January 8th and closed on February 8th, it is no big surprise that we had 20 very strong eligible proposals at our disposal to look at for this project. Now, the city initially went through all of the submissions. We did the initial review of them to make sure that they met all the stringent qualities or requirements for this project. And then we brought in a review panel of 5 members, representative from different stakeholders in the west side area. We had Friends of the Ventura Trail, West Side Community Council. We had West Side Community Development Corporation. We had the city design team. And we also had the Art and Culture Commissioner. So we had 5 members on this review panel, which we assembled. And their task, we gave them the task of actually reducing 20 very strong proposals to a very short list of 4 artists. That is not as easy as it sounds. It was a big challenge for them. And if you can go on to the next slide. So on Monday, March 25th, the review panel had 2 weeks to review all the proposals. And then they came together at City Hall. They had a several hours debate and they had come to a consensus of 4 really strong artists. We have some amazing designs that we can move forward with. These short list of the 4 artists that we have will go on Thursday, April 11th to our Arts and Culture Commissioners. They will be the final decision of the 4 artists that we have on our short list, who will become our next artist and design for that wall. The commissioners will be approving the design. And if you are interested in finding out who is actually on that short list, we're not going to tell you today. It's going to be a little secret. We have posted it yesterday. It is on the city website. That's the cityofventura.ca.gov/City Culture Commission. You can go to that site and you can see the 4 selected artists. You will also see their renderings and their qualifications. So you can make your own decision of what you would like to see there. But I will say they are all extremely strong candidates, extremely strong proposals. So no matter who is chosen, we're going to have a wonderful public art mural. Thank you.
Thank you. And are you, is it, okay, sorry.
Yes. And then back to the final element, which is the wayfinding, and back to that clean and simple signage. We have some very large, kind of like monumental trail signs that are gonna, we work back and forth with Friends of the Ventura River and the city a lot to distinguish, like, it's a very challenging trail because, as I said, we have here's no way you could read that, but purple is the Moraine segment, blue is the Ventura River Trail segment, and green is the Ojai Valley trail segment. So there's actually 3 different segments making up the whole trail. And not only that, but then in places really where you are close to the river, what are you going to call that when, you know, maybe other places like Canada Larga?
Yeah, our landscape architects in the Seepy Creek project were very focused on wayfinding, and is there a way to use iconography to get a bike trail, river, preserve, you know, public land, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So we should share a bunch of stuff
Yeah, definitely. Yep, and we'll can share this as well, because it was kind of our dream that this not only the whole trail at one point gets these improvements, but also that it's very well connected and the signage and mile markers are consistent throughout, which is definitely not something that exists right now. So there's going to be one of these signs right now, right after that Rex Everest entrance, and then again, it's very generalized and it's a sign that kind of encapsulates the whole area, especially further north when you're actually close to the river, and maybe there's an opportunity for, you know, a larger public area with picnic tables or whatever, and it's not just a trail, it's really a parkway area. So then we have one ecological sign going in, one kiosk that kind of explains the history and talks about the area that goes in at West Park, and then we have two of these mile markers going in at, I think, mile like 0.5 and 1.5 at that Ventura River Trail site. And then these are just NUTCD standard signs that we worked with Derek out with the city of Ventura to make sure that there was clean and simple signage. And again, MUTCD standard to get people mostly off of Ventura Avenue and hopefully off of Olive as well, and get them onto the trail because Ventura Avenue is not at all amenable to bikers or real walkers. And then we have the same Ventura River Trail blue to kind of designate the on-trail wayfinding. Okay. So again, just to kind of go through the project improvements as they are aligned to the grant, and what actually is happening is 1.8 miles of that paving, either slurry seal or hold up replacement or reclamation, 3,000 linear feet of fencing to replace some old fencing, 70 plus solar lights, 8 new trash receptacles, 2 new access trails, and 1 the renovated accessible trail access at West Park Community Center. Urban greening, which this project is 200 plus trees, and then we have those additional trees, public art, and wayfinding. And Alex is gonna go.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Puga. Myself with Derek Towers, we were responsible for ensuring that the project went according to plan. But everything was made pretty easy with our prime consultant PCLD. I'm here to talk a little bit about the bid and award process and our construction. So the project was awarded October 30. Sorry, the project bid opening was October 31st. We received 7. There were 7 plan holders and unfortunately only received 1 proposal. One bid. Contract was awarded November 13th to Toro Enterprises from Oxnard, which does quite a bit of work for the city of Ventura, for a total contract amount of $3.63 million in change. Next one, please. Construction, we've kind of lagged a little bit, unfortunately, you know, for multiple reasons, you know, weather being one of them. We've had some pretty poor weather. We had, you know, some hiccups with our SWIP approval process, but we've gotten that complete recently. And then, you know, the marathon in February was a big one for us. We were trying to kind of keep that trail open as much as possible. Initially, we were trying to hopefully work with be able to start construction in the pavement rehab, but unfortunately we weren't able to. But it actually worked out, right? The marathon got done without a hitch. They had nice surface. Hopefully, I think for the next marathon, we are intending to start April 8th, which would be Monday of next week. But that should be with minimal effects to the public and trail use at the moment. We'll be installing, you know, the lighting. We'll have some clearing and grubbing, but that trail should still remain open during, you know, I think the first couple of weeks after April 8th. Then we should start moving it pretty hard after that. The construction currently, I mean, the phasing's not necessarily figured out yet. We're still waiting for the contractor to submit a phasing plan for us and a phasing and traffic control plan. But at a minimum, there's going to be 2 phases, right? There's the north of Stanley, which includes some full depth replacement of pavement at certain sections, and most of it will be slurry seal. So for that short portion, I think, you know, that work will be completed pretty quickly. The south of Stanley is where we're expecting to have more impacts to the public, unfortunately. And the complete impacts are not yet known, like I said, until we receive that phasing plan of what the contractor's intent is, then we can release a little bit more information. But for the time being, yeah, I want everybody to be aware. I mean, we have 2 phases of construction currently, the north of Stanley and south of Stanley. That's how we're going to end up dividing it. Closures and detours, like I mentioned, they're yet to be determined. I think, you know, we'll definitely release some more of that information as we go along. But not much I could speak to on that yet. And then the project completion, we're shooting for July 9th. I think that's a pretty aggressive target date, right? Given our start date, but you know, you shoot for the stars and hopefully you hit them. Hopefully you land amongst them. And yeah, next slide, please. I think so. For the next slide, we'll, you know, there's the URL for the Ventura Road Trail improvements. We have the QR code. All that information as far as closures and everything should be posted on there as we learn about them. And I hope you guys like the project.
Thank you so much. We do have a few questions, but in the chat, in the interest of time, I think we'll like forward you them and get you all connected to people.
Yeah, if anyone has additional questions, you can either email the watershed coordinators and we can connect you with the presenters today if you have follow-up questions, or you can go to their website that's listed here as well.
Yeah, and we are having a break now. Does anybody feel like it's super necessary? We can take like 3 minutes to just stretch, reconvene, use the bathroom. Okay, we'll do that. Great. Well.
I left my
Okay, we are, oh, I hear my reverb. We're back from our break and our next presentation is with the Upper Ventura Groundwater Agency and Rincon Consultants. First, we have Brian Bondi, I believe.
Morning. I'm Brian Bondi, Executive Director of Upper Ventura River Groundwater Agency. And we're here today to talk about the monitoring we're doing of groundwater and river conditions within the Upper Ventura River Basin. And I'm joined by Kieran from Rincon and be presenting as well. Next slide, please. So I want to get a little bit of background about who UVRGA Upper Ventura River Groundwater Agency is. Some of you may not know. And why are we out in the field monitoring groundwater and surface water? And then we'll jump into describing very briefly all the monitoring activities we're doing. Next slide. Okay, next slide. So who is UVRGA and why do we exist? Upper Ventura River Groundwater Agency, UVRGA, we were formed to comply with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act of 2014. And we are a public agency formed under Joint Powers Authority law. And our 5 member agencies consist of Ventura River Water District, Miners Oaks Water District, County Ventura, Cetus Municipal Water District, and the City of Ventura, Ventura Water. And we're governed by a 7-member board with a director from each of those public agencies, as well as a stakeholder director, Yvonne, for environmental and one for agriculture. So what is Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, SGMA? This was a law that came into effect in 2014 that requires local public agencies to form a new public agency called the Groundwater Sustainability Agency for the purposes of complying with the act. And this is a requirement in most groundwater basins in the state. It's based on a priority system. There are some that aren't. Upper Ventura River Groundwater Basin and Ojai Valley Basin is. The lower Ventura River groundwater basin is not subject to SGMA, so it does not have an agency for groundwater management. So where is the Upper Ventura River Basin? Well, it's really in the heart of the watershed. It's outlined here. It starts basically at Foster Park at Cetus Vistas Road and goes up to Camino Cielo Road. You know where that is? It's basically just below the confluence of the 2 creeks of Forks and Tillahaw. And then it includes the Miramonte area as well. But it basically runs along the river, or the watershed. So Upper Ventura River Agency and other groundwater sustainability agencies in the state are required to adopt and implement a groundwater sustainability plan, or GSP. And the purpose of that plan is to achieve or maintain sustainable groundwater conditions, and we have 20 years to do that. So our GSP was adopted in 2022 and approved by the Department of Water Resources last year.
Can we have a question in the audience?
Sure.
Whoever is raising their hand, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, he lowered his hand.
Oh, never mind.
Okay, next slide, please. Plenty of opportunities to ask. So what is this groundwater sustainability plan, or GSP? That includes a number of things. It includes a description of the physical characteristics of the groundwater basin and the water budget, so that we understand how the groundwater basin works and interacts with surface water. And then it also includes sustainable management goal and very specific quantitative sustainable management criteria for each applicable sustainability indicator. And the state in SGMA has identified 6, of which 4 are applicable in our basin. Lowering of groundwater levels, reduction of groundwater storage, degraded water quality, and depletion of interconnected surface water. We do not have seawater intrusion. We're not next to the coast. And the nature of our aquifer materials are that they're not susceptible to land subsidence. So that one's crossed out. The plan also includes, projects and management actions necessary to maintain, in our case, maintain sustainable conditions. And then, of course, why we're here today, our field monitoring programs so that we can demonstrate sustainability. Next slide. So what are our field monitoring programs? We've got quite a few, as you can see the list. We're going to go through each one. We monitor for groundwater levels, groundwater quality,
We do visual monitoring of the stream to see where it's wet and dry at different times of the year. We measure the actual flow at a number of locations of the surface water in Ventura River. And we monitor two different types of groundwater dependent ecosystems. Riparian vegetation is one, and then aquatic areas is two. And for those that are interested, we do an annual data report every year for these different programs, and those can be found online if you want to see more information about the actual data. Next slide. So I'll present on a couple of these, and then we'll turn it over to Kieran. The first one is groundwater levels. So the data we collect groundwater levels two different ways. We go out to the well and manually measure it with an electronic sounder or other device. And then we also maintain a data logger in our wells and continuously record the level. I think we're doing it every couple hours. And we download that data twice per year. We included 9 locations in our GSP. That's these purple dots. You can see they kind of span the basin north to south. And then we identified 5 data gap areas where we didn't have a location to measure groundwater levels. We labeled those A through E. And we've been working on filling those data gaps and actually made a lot of progress in the last year. But in the interest of time, I won't get into the details of where we've added. You can just kind of see the blue stars are wells that we've been adding, mostly in the lower part of the basin where we have intimate interaction between groundwater and surface water. We want to make sure we get good data down here in the Foster Park and Confidence area. So we're collecting groundwater levels for a couple of reasons. One, we need to demonstrate sustainability relative to the 2 indicators in our plan that are directly related to groundwater levels. We also need to understand the levels to understand the water budget of the basin as the basin fills and drains, keep track of the water budget. And then also we need data to calibrate our numerical model of the basin on an ongoing basis. Next slide. So we've got some charts showing some data from the last water year that we've put in our report. Most recent report for the water year that began October 2022 and went through the end of September 2023. So these are groundwater levels in some of the wells that are located north of Baldwin Road, so in the upper part of the basin. And what you can see is, with the exception of this one down here, basically we get good flow in the river, the basin fills up. These levels are about as high as groundwater can get in the basin. It's very permeable, it fills up very fast. And then we see into the dry part of the year, groundwater levels slowly decline. And so what's happening is groundwater is draining downstream and coming into the groundwater, into the surface water system in the lower parts of the basin. So this is basically just showing that drainage happening. The water table is lowering as water is flowing downhill towards Foster Park. This odd guy over here, this is a well in the Miramonte area. It behaves completely differently than the wells along the river. And that's because those wells are in an older geologic formation that's less permeable and has less connectivity hydraulically with the river. So you can see it's just pretty flat, very small rise in response to the rains we had during the water year. Next slide. So now we look at the wells south of Baldwin Road, which have, except for one of them, a very different response. We probably should group this green one with the wells north of Baldwin Road because it behaves like them, where basically this well at this point is near Santa Ana Road. And this level, basically the well's dry. The aquifer actually completely desaturates in that area in many years. And then you can see once we get water flowing in the river, that well fills all the way up and reaches its maximum point very quickly. These other wells, these are down in Foster Park, and you can see that they don't vary much. You see a little bit of spikes when the river, we have high stage in the river, the groundwater level will spike. But for the most part, it just stays pretty constant. And that's because this area is receiving groundwater from upstream and keeping this area kind of at a constant level most of the time. Next slide, please. I think in the interest of time, I won't spend too much on these charts. These are just showing the elevation of the groundwater levels. Here were the prior charts were the depth from land surface. We look at elevation so we can see flow direction. So basically all this is showing is, well, the groundwater levels at higher elevations in the northern part of the basin and then progressively getting lower. That's just, you know, we've got 600 feet of topography from the top of our basin to the bottom. So this is just sort of reflecting that.
Right, Brian, excuse me, are those just same set of monitoring wells, just showing the cross section?
It's the same set, just showing instead of depth from ground, the elevation relative to sea level.
South.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next slide. We'll just skip the next slide. All right, so what did we observe in the water year? As you saw in the charts, overall groundwater levels rose following the storms, winter storms in 2023. And the basin filled up to essentially its maximum level that it can. And then the levels started to decline, but they stayed above the levels in the prior dry season in the prior water year. Next slide. Groundwater quality. All right. So this program's a little bit different. We don't go out and sample wells. We rely on data that others are collecting. And our GSP focuses on nitrate. That was really the only constituent of concern that rose to a level that required us to do something in the GSP. We have 8 locations where we collect data or obtain data for nitrate. And actually, I think that should be 8, so not 8. And then we group them. You can see some of these wells are grouped. They're in close proximity, and some wells are sampled some years and not in others. So we treat these groups as a single data point for the purposes of evaluating sustainability. We also are working with domestic well owners. We're going through a process where we're requiring everybody to register their well if it's active. And we have a questionnaire. And one of the questions on there is whether for the domestic wells, if they would like us to sample their water. I'm particularly focused on wells that people are using to drink the water because of the nitrate issue. So at some point, we may do some supplementary sampling at some of these locations, but that'll most likely be a 1 or 2 time event. So we're collecting this data to assess sustainability relative to the degraded water quality criterion. And in our water year 22-23, our nitrate concentrations as nitrogen ranged from 2.8 to 5.7, which is less than our sustainable management criteria of 10. So we're sustainable relative to our criteria. Next slide.
Is that an average?
Those are, if it's from a well group, they're averaged. Yeah. All right, visual stream monitoring. Next slide. So this is where we go out physically and walk the river, wade the river, whatever it takes, to find out where we have surface water flow and where we don't. And we do this on a monthly basis. At times like this, it's really easy because the river is running through the whole basin and we don't actually need to go out and look. But when we get into the summer and we start getting the dry reaches up in the Robles area, we go out, hike, and find that and get it with the GPS. And the reason we're doing this is to identify the timing and location of where intermittent flow ceases. This is important information that we used in the GSP to identify where our aquatic GDE areas are. And we're going to continue to track this over time to see how it's dynamic through different climate conditions. Most of the data we had that we've been collecting since about 2017, 2018 was under dry conditions. And so now we're seeing under wetter conditions what this looks like. So I think with that, it's Karen's turn.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, so I'll talk about the other components that Brian introduced in the beginning. I'll start with surface water flow monitoring. The next slide. So as this figure shows, there's several stream gauging locations throughout the watershed. Most of them are active, some of them are inactive at the moment, and then the SARs that UVRGA manages and collects data for are temporary. So they're installed in about May, June, July timeframe throughout the dry season, and then removed prior to the storm season. The reason that we're collecting these data are to quantify and understand what the surface flow conditions are entering and leaving the basin. And then that data is used to evaluate those sustainable management criteria, specifically identified for the GDE areas, those groundwater dependent ecosystem areas. So that's how we're using it in our monitoring program. The next slide shows an example of one of the, or we'll talk about one of the stream gauging locations. The data collected and the way that we developed the data for this location is the same for the other 4 locations throughout the basin for UVRGA. So I'll just walk through this. The data collected that we actually collect in the field is cross-section surveys. So the longitudinal surveys of the actual cross-section of the channel. Channel slope, we install and deploy pressure transducers that are collecting data on high frequency, 15-minute intervals. And then we do at least monthly instantaneous flow measurements throughout the monitoring period. And this is for those 4 that UVRGA manages. Next slide shows, and we'll talk about kind of the reasons why. So all that data goes into the development of a rating curve, which is kind of it's an equation that looks at the levels that are collected with the pressure transducers, so the surface, the actual water levels in the river, and it relates that to a flow. And so this left chart shows that rating curve, and then the right chart shows a hydrograph that's actually relating the level that's collected with the high frequency pressure transducer, so the level of the water, and relating that to actual cubic feet per second, so a discharge rate. Next slide. And the key observations that we made or that we saw throughout the year is that, unsurprisingly, high flows persisted. We have delayed our deployment of the equipment until July. It's looking like we might be able to get a little bit earlier this year, just because we've been able to recon the sites. We understand where locations are, and we've kind of got that all sorted out. And yeah, and the obvious observations related to flow. So then the next monitoring component that I'll talk about is the riparian GDE monitoring. Next slide, please. So for this, everything is detailed in the monitoring plans that are available on UVRGA's website, but it includes remotely sensed data, NDVI and NDMI. This is normalized difference vegetation index and moisture index. These are essentially indicators of the health of the riparian communities. So we use that kind of as a starting point. We also are collecting aerial ortho imagery, so kind of geo-referenced images that can be reproduced on a recurring basis via drone. This is actually collected under the aquatic GDE monitoring program, but it's used for both. And then the data collected that Brian presented off of groundwater levels, and then precipitation is evaluated as part of this. And so the reason why we're collecting all this data is essentially just to assess the health of the riparian habitats and the vegetation along the river, and relate that to groundwater conditions. So this chart, or the left chart, shows for Foster Park riparian GDE and South Santa Ana riparian GDE. So these are 2 of the GDE's units that were identified, riparian GDE units that were identified in the GSP, Groundwater Sustainability Plan. And what you'll see along this is, I think this is showing the NDVI and NDMI averages along the bottom of the charts, and then on the top is the groundwater levels. The main takeaways from these charts, don't read into it too much, but essentially what we're seeing is that riparian habitat conditions referenced by the NDVI and these remotely sensed data kind of track the groundwater levels. So it's no real surprise in what we're seeing. Lowering groundwater levels equate to a little bit reduction in the index, but then it responds quite well once the groundwater levels come back up. So that's the key takeaway from there. Key observations from this past monitoring period were that the NDVI values decreased while the groundwater levels increased. But this was actually expected because those remotely sensed data are just indicators, and it's also so the drop in those index values is actually also reflecting the scouring that occurred in the basin. So that's why the various monitoring components, including the aerial imagery, is so important to evaluate as part of this program. Okay, so the aquatic GDE monitoring program. So next slide. The components here are many. So there's habitat mapping. So like aquatic habitat mapping that we do in stream. We'll do for the confluence GDE. We'll do fish stranding and mortality surveys. Then we'll do, I'll explain why and some of the nuances and the differences between the two GDE, aquatic GDEs. But fish stranding mortality surveys for confluence, and then for both of the locations, routine habitat suitability and snorkel surveys. We do the water quality and flow monitoring. We have the aerial ortho imagery, the aerial photography, and then we do recurrent ground photography at the same locations repeatedly. The purpose of this is for the confluence aquatic habitat area GDE. So this aquatic GDE, we're evaluating whether or not interconnected surface water depletion is causing significant and unreasonable effects, and determining and assessing whether or not sustainable management criteria are in fact needed. If sustainable management criteria are needed to address the depletion of interconnected surface waters, then we'll be looking at and evaluating what types of long-term monitoring needs there might be. And so the difference between the confluence and Foster Park aquatic GDE is that confluence area, we didn't have any site-specific science to back up the development of sustainable management criteria, whereas with the Foster Park aquatic GDE, we actually had some studies to rely on. And so the purpose of the Foster Park aquatic GDE monitoring program is to assess how those sustainable management criteria for interconnected surface water depletion are doing, and then use that information, that data, those findings to inform what type of long-term monitoring needs there might be. Okay, so the next slide shows, I guess the next couple slides will show a series of charts that show the flow that was collected at an upstream location and a downstream location for both of the aquatic GDEs. And so we're looking at the confluence hydrographs here. I'm not going to go through all the different nuances of the data collected, but essentially what you see is for upstream of confluence, that area, so this is upstream of the actual San Antonio Creek confluence where it meets the Ventura River, you're seeing lower flow rates. And then after the confluence, you're seeing higher flow rates. So it's just nice to have these data and see the differences between the two locations. Then to the next slide, we're looking at the Foster Park hydrographs. The upstream location is UVRGA's dedicated stream gauging location. And then the downstream Foster Park hydrograph is using the USGS stream gauge, Concedas Vistas. Then we're going into the next slide. So this is just showing a summary of the habitat data that was collected for our aquatic mesohabitat surveys. So this was the initial mapping that we did. And the mapping identified a large number of different mesohabitats, so in-stream, the different kinds of like pools, riffles, runs. And you'll see that, you'll just see the numbers, the key takeaways, but the observations that we made at each data point included habitat and channel type, water and air temperature, the length of the habitat area, the average and maximum depths for each of those habitat types, substrate composition, canopy cover, and all these sorts of things that kind of feed into the habitat suitability index for specifically for steelhead is what we're looking at. The next slide shows just a summary of the field observations made during our snorkel surveys. So actually getting into the river and making observations of habitat type, the water temperature, macro invertebrate presence. So this is part of the food chain, species that you see on the bottom of the river itself. Fish species, the different life stages of those fish species, and then the count and key notes about those species that we're seeing, and then also noting invasive species that might be present during our snorkels. The next slide is showing essentially just some figures. This presents the data that we collect. No need to really dig into it too much, but it shows the series of charts for the confluence aquatic GDE area from north to south when you look left to right. You can see there's many data points that were collected, and so all these data are being used for the assessment program to evaluate the performance, or to evaluate the need for sustainable management criteria. The next slide shows Fox Park, just kind of showing the same thing. And so key takeaways is that the aquatic conditions were representative higher than normal flow conditions. We didn't see any fish stranding or mortality during at the confluence area. There was still, even though the flows were high, there was still a little bit of concern related to that issue because there was braiding and there were secondary channels. So we still did our due diligence and conducted the work that was necessary and outlined in the monitoring plan. And then while we, oh, sorry, I went to the next slide.
Oh, no problem.
While there were sensitive aquatic species observed, we did not see any steelhead and lamprey. We did see a roe chub. In fact, we saw like 48. We counted or estimated there was like 48,000. 3-spine stickleback, close to 3,000. And then we saw invasives as well, mud snails and bullfrog. And we'll be wrapping up. I'll take questions on the next slide, but there's a lot of excitement in the river right now and throughout all of our rivers and throughout our systems, because we are starting to see lamprey specifically. And so the importance of our snorkels for this coming year will help us understand, what we're seeing going back. With that, any questions?
Yeah.
Questions. So on the NBDI, one of the issues with the scour, to get the scour and there's just less veg, is the reoccurrence and colonization of new stands of Rondo. Is there a spectral signature you can use to start to document that reinvasion of places that have been treated like the confluence?
That's a great question. It's something that we're looking at. So as part of the riparian GDP monitoring and the reporting that we do, we'll use that aerial imagery and we will have our botanists actually view it. And we've been able to do really fine scale vegetation mapping using ortho imagery. Part of that work, that monitoring program, we have a field component to just ground truth what we're seeing aerially. But there's also, it's kind of a teaser, but we're looking at kind of that identification of different spectrals. There's lots of opportunities with the new technologies, but there's nothing really solid yet. But the science is advancing.
Do you have our data from did you give all our mapping data for Rondo?
I think so.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. And then when you look at the confluence GD, aquatic GD, you said obviously when San Antonio Creeks comes in, there's more flows. Is it a direct ratio, or is there groundwater expression happening at the base of that part of the aquifer?
I don't think we've analyzed that data. I wouldn't be surprised if it's both.
Right.
But yeah, we could look at.
I suspect it's both.
Yeah. Because it's kind of a breaking slope there.
Okay, and then back to you. So when you get benthics, are you doing any biotic index work? Okay.
No, just pure observation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. We have one question in Zoom, if you'd like to unmute yourself. Danny.
Yeah, this is Danny. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I just have a few questions quickly. First of all, thank you for the presentations. Regarding, it seems like the water table is pretty high in the aquifers or the groundwater. So as a result I guess there's no need for recharge ponds. That's one of the questions, similar to like the Freeman diversion and the United Water settling ponds. Number two, any concern, I see the high nitrate, which is pretty common and expected, I imagine that's fertilizer. Any other concerns in the water quality, like pathogens or pesticides, for, human consumption? And third question is the lake, Casitas Lake Dam discharge. Do you expect, are they discharging? Do you expect any concerns there with the discharge? And then finally, what percentage of the groundwater is used for ag versus residential tap water? Thank you.
I think those are all for me.
Yeah.
See if you can. Let's see, that was a lot of questions. Percentage of ag versus municipal. I'd have to look at, our annual report breaks that down, but I can tell you that the municipal use is much more than the ag use. The question about water quality, we are not tracking pesticides, pharmaceuticals, those sorts of things. The water agencies, the public water suppliers are, and I'm not aware of any issues with those in our basin. We're tracking nitrate. We're focusing on nitrate because it affects the domestic wells. We are finding from our well registration process that we do have a small number of domestic wells that are used for drinking water that do not have an alternative source of water. And so that's where our focus is. And the nitrate appears to be more confined to the Miramonte area, probably from legacy sources. The aquifer doesn't flow very quickly, so that nitrate hasn't really washed out of that system. So that's where we see it the most.
Brent, I thought there was also a nitrate problem in the north end of Myers Oaks Water District by the river bottom neighborhood.
It's at the edge, that's at the edge of that area.
Yeah.
In the Miramonte area.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. What were the other questions? The
The
first.
dam, Casitas Dam discharge, are they starting to discharge? Do you see an issue with that?
I'm not aware of any discharges from Casitas Dam. Those would come down, what is it, Coyote Creek? Yep. And would come out down near Foster Park. I'm not aware of any discharges. I don't know if Mary's still on, if she wants to speak to that. It's 96%. Yeah.
And lastly was the no need for man-made recharge ponds.
No, this basin is amazing. The sediments are so permeable that the statistic we came up with in our GSP is that if we have half of the average annual flow, so a year where the river is flowing half of its average, the basin built up.
Yeah.
The river is the recharge basin, and it does a fantastic job of filling up the aquifer.
And I guess that would be a concern then with the water quality of surface contaminants quickly then, percolating into the groundwater table. And if there's use for residential, then hence the water quality concern.
Whatever
human consumption.
In the groundwater. Yep.
Great. Thank you so much. If anyone has more questions, definitely we'll put in, okay, sure. Since you're in person.
Going on in Foster Park with about a month or so of the excavators and the bulldozers and the earth movers.
Yeah, the city had to do some work to fix its infrastructure, is my understanding.
Two things on that. One was Ojai Sanitation District has rocks put in because of the potential for losing the line. They dropped a bunch of them. Ventura Water had a water line go out. They got permits and everything and redid all the work there. And basically reconstructed their water line on the east side of the bank there. And they also moved down about 500 fish and found a couple lampreys.
That's so cool. Okay. Okay, and lastly, thank you so much for being here. We have the Ojai Valley Fire Safe Council introducing their community resilience centers. And let me pull up your slides. Why is this not working? Sorry, my mouse is not working anymore. There it is. Sorry. Okay, thank you for
Hi.
joining us.
Hi, I'm Callie O'Connor. I'm the Executive Assistant of the Ojai Valley Fire Safe Council, and I work with Christopher Dench. We can go to the next slide. We're here to introduce you to a new project we were awarded called the Ojai Valley Community Resilience Centers Project. It's a substantial planning grant. We'll go briefly into an introduction of the Ojai Valley Fire Safe Council, and then we'll go into the Community Resilience Centers Project, its core functions, the implementation strategies that will guide the development of these centers. And as it is a community-driven project, there are many possibilities. And then we'll go into the short-term next steps, which includes the formation of a collaborative stakeholder structure, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. So the Ojai Valley Fire Safe Council was established in 2000. Our mission is to promote the wildfire safety in the Ojai Valley region through education and action. We have successfully managed many federal, state, and locally funded grants. We recently closed out 3 foundational projects in March, and we are about to close our Ojai Valley Community Wildfire Protection Plan by the end of this month. We have extensive partnerships. We work with the Ventura County Fire Department, the RCD, Ojai Valley Land Conservancy, and many other fire safe councils, just to name a few of the orgs. Next slide. So we have a holistic approach, and how we came to that was really the Thomas Fire started it. It was a sobering wake-up call, and it prompted us to begin a comprehensive and new initiative, which led to our wildfire risk mitigation strategy. We heard that we're heading to El Niños and an El Niño season, and we're hearing that we're gonna have like a prolonged drought. So with these longer drought seasons, we don't have a short fire season anymore. We have a full year of fire season. So we have to come to the terms and accept the terms that we can't eliminate wildfire risk, but what we can do is adapt to that risk. In order to be a truly fire adapted community, adapting to that risk looks like caring for the health of our land and building social cohesion. Social cohesion is the #1 predictor of a community's ability to adapt to and recover from tragic events such as a catastrophic wildfire event. Resilient landscapes plus resilient communities equals wildfire resilience. Next slide. So now we'll go into the Ojai Valley Community Resilience Centers Project, also known as the Ojai Valley CRCs. It's funded by the state, the California Strategic Growth Council, and the program is phased into 3 phases: planning, development, and implementation. You can also see that there's sort of a pipeline of funding related to those phases, and we applied for phase 1. Next slide. And we were awarded. We were awarded $470K, and we were 1 out of 11 awardees out of a total of 87 applicants. And we went to Sacramento and accepted the award. That's us with the Strategic Growth Council at the Environmental Protection Agency building. We feel like we have entered a funding ecosystem. Subsequent funding seems very likely because the state wants to see this through the implementation phase. Next slide. So we have 2 proposed sites. One is at the west campus of the west end of the Ojai Valley, at the previous women's maximum security jail, which is about 20,000 square feet. And then we have another one in Upper Ojai at the Summit School, and that's more addressing the east end. They're strategically placed for evacuation considering our limited access and egress routes. We have to show at the end of this project site control for at least 15 years. And right now we're working on an access agreement with the county and the help of Ojai for the West Campus location. And we're in discussion with Ojai Unified School District for that second site location in Upper Ojai. Next slide. So what is the purpose of these CRCs? You know, we know that the Ojai Valley is highly vulnerable to natural disasters. We are at the top 1% of the nation for wildfire risk, according to Headwaters Economics. We're experiencing longer seasons of drought marked with intense rainstorms that are short. This not only makes us vulnerable to wildfire, as we've seen with the Thomas Fire and even smaller, more recent fires like the Villanova one, but also we're vulnerable to erosion, to landslides. The 150, is that still closed? Yes. Yeah, 150 is still closed. And the 33, you know, suffered great damage from the atmospheric river event last year. So we also have, you know, limited access and egress routes, and that makes for a very fragile transit system. So the purpose of these CRCs is to face and address these challenges as a community. Next slide. So there are two comprehensive core functions laid out by the state program. One is that they must function as an emergency preparedness, response, and recovery center. And they're also a community center for education, programs, and services that build overall community resilience. And that's year-round. That's a year-round function, and 24/7, we have to be ready to be an emergency center. Next slide. In the case of a public emergency, the CRCs must serve the function of a response center. So it can be an evacuation center for mass care shelter. So there will be food, beds, showers available to those who need it. It will act as a cooling and heating center. There will be public emergency communications, as well as a full islanded microgrid with energy storage and backup generation capacity, and that's at both sites. Considering our limited access and egress routes, the CRCs, if appropriate to the conditions of that disaster, can serve as a shelter-in-place option, lowering the amount of cars on our roadways. Next slide. In addition to the core function of emergency response, the CRC will have year-round services and programs that build overall community resilience. These programs and services are determined by the community and the stakeholders that are involved. There is no template provided by the state. So, you know, our team has been brewing out, what is that going to look like? And we think that the CRCs are a platform for the community to come together and to face and address our ecological and societal challenges. It is an educational platform where different communities can share knowledge and interact. And it's where we can better understand our bioregion and its landmark resources, such as the watershed, and discuss resource management. Bioregionalism is a recognition of our common values, that we love this valley and we want it to thrive. And we also see them as serving as a model. Ojai is uniquely situated to put together these CRCs that are comprehensive and inspirational and reflect the shared values of those who live here. I want to also leave that broad enough because a lot of this is going to be decided in this planning grant with community outreach and with the stakeholders involved. Next slide. So the state organized categories of implementation strategies that these programs and services fall into. They require addressing 4 of these implementation strategies, but we plan to address all of them. Next slide. just to awaken the imagination, here are just some of the possibilities. And these are some of the ideas that the team has been brewing. The possibilities are numerous and are determined by our community and the stakeholders involved. And we hope them to be comprehensive and expansive. All right, so our short-term next steps is we're currently in the post-award documentation. For those involved with grants, you know what that means. And we're gonna go into our consultation process. We originally applied for 500K, but because they awarded 11, they took off that amount from 10 to be able to award that 11. So we have to talk about budgeting and stuff like that. And then we're gonna execute the grant agreement and we will host a project kickoff event. Hope to see some of you there. And then the formation of the collaborative stakeholder structure follows that. All right, next. So the collaborative stakeholder structure is tiered and it's required by the grant to have it. We hope it to be efficient, diverse, inclusive, with expertise and experience, and making sure that the community is being represented and that there are many opportunities for the community to be heard and for their input to be integrated. All right, next. And that's the brief introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, do we have any questions in here? And over Zoom, we have one. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, this is Danny. Thank you. I may have missed it, but is there any support from DOT and Caltrans to help clear and make roadways available, such as the 150 and the 33 North for evacuation? So that's one question. Second is wildlife rescue centers. Is that part of your scope, like for horses in the event of wildfire, pets, some stuff like that? Thank you.
Those are good questions. I'll let Christopher answer.
Well, just to clarify the first question regarding Caltrans, et cetera, on improving evacuation routes. Now, that's not part of this program. We don't have no authority with that. Well, we just completed an evacuation assessment that included transit modeling, and we had a number of technical advisory groups that included Caltrans, CHP, DC, Ventura County OES, Ventura County Transportation Commission, and others looking at this issue. The findings of that report will be made public soon. That's one of the 3 projects that Callie referred to. Without spoiler alert, in many ways, the study didn't tell us anything we didn't already know about it. Now, of course, it's, gone anecdotal to data driven, but a large number, we all know that our transit system can be instantly stressed out, and we try to get every out of the valley, it grinds to a halt. And those routes can be easily closed 2 days into the Thomas fire all around. So when we looked at a number of capital improvement project options with the TAG group, we looked at other kinds of management, including signaling in various places. All of these run into topographical problems, into cost and complexity, and the staffing necessary to do that. And so, as we figured, it's not a lot that can actually be done, except for our main strategy is to radically improve the ability for people to shelter in place safely in the valley and not have to get out. These centers are one of the keys to that strategy. We're also looking at other places called temporary refuge areas. We have some grants outstanding now to create 2 of those. But, it gets more complex because, you can't advertise places in advance of natural fire and fire behavior. So one of the things we're looking at, and the centers will kind of be a physical embodiment of that, is actually trying to improve public emergency communication and messaging that's in real time. Because if you have nuanced options for evacuation authorities to adopt, they have to be able to communicate that to the public. And right now, we know in the Thomas fire that didn't happen. So, but we're very pleased that I think the two locations are key. Obviously, they were identified in the transit study as being key. Our TAG group roundly supported these locations. So they're key in that regard. With respect to the other question, I already forgot it.
Will there be,
It was wildlife rescue centers for like horses and pets that have to like shelter in place or be evacuated to a local, wildlife horse rescue center or wildlife center.
Yes, in the evacuation planning that we're doing, and already that, this is being worked on by BTOS, which is the head of the evacuation planning authorities. Sheltering of animals is important. Now, at the West Campus site, for example, our use of that facility will most likely not be restricted just to the women's sale, but also these centers have two things. They have the actual center itself, and they have what's called campus amenities. And those, in our cases involving these two locations, one of those campus amenities is the place to take large animals and other pets. And there'll be facility, and there'll be, supplies, water, power, communications at those locations that will facilitate that kind of plan.
Yeah, great. Lastly, is there emergency medical provisions in some of these shelter in place for, in the event that EMT and EMS, can't respond? Is there emergency medical provided in some of these shelter in place facilities?
The plan is to have that capacity at these centers. Have to look at how it's actually going to happen, what's happening in the planning phase, what's going to happen in the development phase. The planning phase deliverables, that's going to go back to the state, is going to be site control for these two sites. We need to have a cost estimate of what capital improvements and other amenities are going to be established. Renderings, floor plans, if there's going to be new construction, or how we're going to do these sites, and the formation of this formal collaborative stakeholder structure, which is key. Now, we have to actually have that finished within the first year of the 2-year planning grant. But we will be identifying, obviously, we need to have, through the stakeholder structure, look at what is actually going to happen in these centers so that we can look at what actual amenities and improvements have to be made and what would necessitate new construction. But the medical capacity is actually very important, and that is one that's definitely on the list. And other CRCs that have been established have that. A good example is Tuolumne County entered this program several years ago. After the planning grant, they got funding from the state, I think almost 21 million, to construct two 16,000 square foot centers that have that kind of capacity. And our little team is heading up there at the beginning of May to tour these facilities. Actually, they were quite helpful in the application phase as well. Again, that's not necessarily what we're doing, but it's interesting. We have two centers we count in the Tuolumne, and they serve different populations and have different programs and services, in addition to the core function of emergency response.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Okay. I think that concludes our meeting. It was a very filled one for the start of spring. So thank you all for coming and joining us online and in person, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.